Hello, everyone. This is your host, Susan Rosen. And today, my guest, sorry, I had a mind fart there, I think, is Stephen Abbey. And he has taken a novel approach to the health and wellness industry, and he's going to tell us all about that today. Welcome, Stephen.
Well, thanks for having me on, Susan. Yeah, I been going down the health and wellness path for almost 30 years now, and excited to be here and share it with you.
Great, great. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you ended up
Well,
doing
to
what you're doing.
make a long story short, born and raised in Santa Barbara, was very typical in terms of belief systems about health. Went to University of Colorado and got a degree in economics and psychology, which great to have, but I'm not really using. But then while I was at school, I developed all of these conditions. One of them is pretty serious psoriasis. I started having fibromyalgia. I had reactive hypoglycemia, and I was not doing well. I had weight issues and I was really struggling. And I was going to a whole bunch of doctors trying to just see, can this doctor help me? I'd be willing to wager some of your listeners can relate to that. Can this
Oh,
doctor
yeah.
help me? Like, I've heard about this person and I go over to them. And the bottom line is I just wasn't getting any results. So I decided to really start doing my own research. And at that time, it wasn't like we have the internet with all the studies available and all. So I was
Yes.
having to do these really deep dives, but I started to get fascinated because not only was there information on a really amazing studies done on what I was dealing with personally that I was able to really undo, but I started to see the same thing fantastic studies on cancer, heart disease,
Mm.
diabetes, hypertension, autoimmune conditions in general, osteoporosis, everything. And I
Uh-huh.
just started to geek out on studies and go down this path of what can be done. And fast forward, I started working with some naturopathic doctors. I started working with
Mm.
friends, and then ended up being on the support team for several friends at the end of their life who were dying
Uh,
from preventable diseases. And it was nearly impossible to get really good nutrition for them to support them. And
uh,
when a really close friend of mine died, I was like, okay, so I'm going to go out and I'm going to create a product so that this is very easy, that we can prevent these things to begin
mhm.
with. And then if somebody has something, they can take this as a really good base of nutrition and then just use nutraceuticals as well as pharmaceuticals if needed to target it. And so that was kind of the journey. And I launched in October of last year in 2022. And but
Oh,
I've been
wow.
doing the development for almost 3 years because it's been a long
Mm.
journey of development. So
Okay. Okay. So are you mostly online or
yeah, I'm online.
how does it
In Santa
work?
Barbara, I do everything online, and
Uh-huh.
I do presentations here, and I work
Mm-hmm.
with people that have certain conditions, but
Uh-huh.
so but it's all currently online. It's going to be in some stores, but it's really made for the online market because there's just no margin in it, to be quite honest. It's just all Whole Foods, and Whole Foods are expensive. And so there just can't be that much of a margin. So it doesn't really fit to go into stores that easily.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, it's I have a marketing degree, so my head goes into that. But you're better off online anyways, because you can find a much larger market.
Yeah.
You know, if you're in a store, you're geographically limited.
Yes, very much so. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, but a lot of people here in Santa Barbara are starting to
Uh,
know about this and starting to
mm,
utilize it. So, but they,
good.
it would be good to have it in a few stores, and I'll do that. but that's not going to be my focus. It's just, yeah, I don't think it's not really built because it requires so much information because it's such a different product than what's typically on the market. So it requires a lot more information.
Okay. Okay. So you said something interesting there. It's a much different product. So tell me what it is tell me more about the product.
Well, the product is I'll say if you look on the market and there are whole food products, but they're not comprehensive, and they're comprehensive products, but they're not whole foods. So in other words, the nutrients that are, if you see it listed, it'll say ascorbic acid or calcium ascorbate or ascorbate or liposomal vitamin C. Those are all synthetic nutrients. So I'll give you an example of what that means. So if you see ascorbic acid, that's the vitamin C from a lab, right? And that all used to be manufactured in a lab in New Jersey, or 90% of the world's supply. That's all moved over to China. Now 95% of the world's supply is manufactured in China. And the main way that it's manufactured is you take high fructose corn syrup, you put it under incredible pressure, incredible heat, you do an acetone wash, and you neutralize it with hydrochloric acid. And in the end, you have a molecule that is chemically identical to what you find in nature. However, it has no vitamin activity on its own, right? It will not cure scurvy if you're dying of scurvy, which is the disease of lack of vitamin C. And because vitamin C or ascorbic acid needs all the cofactors, it needs the bioflavonoids and all, they're like 9 different cofactors that it needs to actually have vitamin activity. And so when you make it in isolation like that, it doesn't have the same effect. So what is mine? Mine's based on a blend of freeze-dried organic berries. Why freeze-dried? Because they retain almost 90% of the nutrients from fresh. Whereas if you do it air dried, they're put under a heating lamp after they've been pulverized, and then they're turned into powder, right? But it destroys so much of the nutrition.
Yeah, so well, it's like cooking them.
They're essentially cooking them, and that's how they dry it. And it's a very inexpensive drying process. Freeze-dried is much more expensive, so I pay almost 3.5 times more than organic air-dried berries, and probably almost 4.5 times more than conventional air-dried berries. So it becomes very expensive, but for really whole food nutrition, that is what I've chosen to do. I'll give you another quick example. If you look at almost every product on the market, you'll see the iodine is from potassium iodine. So that's just a synthetic form of iodine, very inexpensive, multiple places manufacturing, never going to have a supply chain issue, not going to have a taste issue. I, on the other hand, am getting a blend of 3 organic kelps from Iceland, far away from any industrial center, that they blend it together, and then they measure how much iodine is in there, and they standardize 3,000 parts. So I can get the exact dose of iodine that I want. That's very different energetically. So I've been talking about like all these things, but if you think about how we normally get things in nature and how we've always grown, the difference between a whole food thing like what I've just described, which is a green leafy vegetables full of 72 trace minerals, but it just happens to have iodine. And that's a natural, gentle way of getting iodine, as opposed to potassium iodide, which is just this very blast. I mean, it's 76% iodine. I mean, it's just 2 molecules bound together, and it's 76%, whereas mine is 0.3%. So it's just totally different. Yeah, I have to use 256 times more to get the same amount of iodine. It's a very different. And then zinc, it's from a guava leaf extract. That's guava that's grown on unique soil with a high zinc content, and it's extracted from there. So it's just, they're very different types. But if you don't do the synthetic route, this is the way you have to go. And it becomes a very time-consuming thing. That's why it took me almost 3.5 years to put this whole thing together.
Oh, I'm sure. So do you have to, not you specifically, human beings, whatever. Um, so does one have, do you have to take less of it because it is more concentrated to get into
The
like the
other way
zinc and
around
the,
is you
I'm
have
sorry?
to take less because it's less concentrated. And when you're using natural food products,
Right,
it's almost like ascorbic acid, which was the vitamin C. People are
right.
taking 1,000 milligrams. In
I
nature,
know,
you don't need to take 1,000 milligrams.
I
So,
know.
I mean, I think in my product, it's like 170% or 160% of the RDA. So that's about 150 milligrams, but that's natural, fully formed, ready to go vitamin C. It's
Uh-huh.
like when you use ascorbic acid, it's almost like using it as a drug. It's used as a drug for anti-cancer, where they
Hmm.
inject it in at like 100,000% of the RDA, right? I mean, it's just ginormous amount. And they actually inject, in many places that do this, they inject a plasma that's high in oxygen, because what it does is create hydrogen peroxide on the site of the cancer cell. But now you're using it as a drug. You're not using this for your
Right.
nutrition, vitamin C requirement. Very different thing.
Yeah.
So, like, to me, what I want to have is gentle nutrition that my body can choose what it needs and what it doesn't need and gently extract it. All from things that, and this might sound airy-fairy, but that have the energetics of coming from nature. Because everything
Mm.
has vibrational frequency. I don't mean to go down that route, but truth is there's a difference. And
Yeah.
so to me, that's why I created this product. I wanted it comprehensive, so it has things that are not on the RDA, like 2
Hmm.
grams of organic mushrooms, and with high beta glucan and low starch, because
Mm.
don't want too much of the substrate in there, what they grow the mushrooms on. And but that's not a part of the RDA, but that is so critically important for your immune function. And
Hmm.
I mean, it's just, it seems from everything that I've seen, it's just fantastic. The studies are off the chart with mushrooms. So having that in there, having a prebiotic, having a probiotic. So it's just a very, very different product.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, it sounds like it. It sounds like it. So is it something like other supplements that you can, that a customer, whoever can buy directly
Yeah.
from you and not have to get a prescription or any of that kind of stuff,
No, it's
right?
not a prescription item. It's just,
Yeah.
and by the way, I haven't even said this, but it's really, it was designed, this first product was designed to be part of the smoothie, because I didn't put any flavorings or sweeteners.
Mm.
It doesn't taste horrible, but it's not like, it's not a McDonald's milkshake, right? But what I say on my website is participate in your own health. And if you make a healthy smoothie with it, like full of all
Hmm.
these things, and I know it's kind of counteracting, like, here's this very complete product, but the truth is it's really meant to fill in all the gaps of a smoothie. But if somebody doesn't do a smoothie, it's still got the greens, it's still got the berries and everything like that, but that's
Mm.
not your full day supply. That's a serving of it, but people should be eating a lot more than that. So a very simple way of doing that is you make a smoothie with a bunch of greens, with a bunch of berries, with a nut and seed butter, and put some stuff in there like that, and then you put in the product. And now all the things that are missing in a normal smoothie, I mean, normal smoothies don't have mushrooms, they don't have vitamin K2 at all, and vitamin K2 is critical for heart health and bone health. They don't have vitamin D, and that's critical for all sorts of things, as all the research is coming out even in the mainstream.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, vitamin B12 that's not normally in there. And, and then the things that are very small amounts like selenium, zinc, chromium, things like that are now all being covered in a healthy whole food way. So you have whole
Hmm.
foods on top of whole foods. And I'm having these amazing results with people that are doing this consistently. So yeah, it's working out really well.
Wow, that's great. That's great. Huh. So does your website um have all of this information, accessible and um easily, what's the right word?
You mean is all the
Taken
information
in.
right there so somebody can do a deep dive? Yeah, and they can reach out to me.
Yeah,
It's my passion,
yeah,
right? So I've
right.
been studying this stuff for years. There's a whole bunch of information on the website,
Uh-huh.
but the truth is they reach out. I'm happy to jump on a phone call, Zoom call, whatever, and go through it because again, there's so much that can be done. I've been working with cancer patients for all these years, and
Mm.
the one, like, I'll give you an example of cancer because
Uh-huh.
it's such a scourge in this country, and that has been one of the drivers for what had me create this.
Yeah.
But cruciferous vegetables, there was a huge meta-analysis that just came out a few years ago,
Mm.
and they looked at all the studies on cruciferous vegetables. And the authors at the end said those people that have 3 to 5 servings a week of cruciferous vegetables, 3 to 5 servings a week compared to 1 serving or less, right? And they are going to have 30 to 40% less cancer on average across the board. But it can also be used
Yeah.
for treatment. And if you're using it even more than that, you can have more. And anyway, it goes down. And if you're using broccoli sprouts, which have 10 to
Oh, yeah.
100 times the sulforaphane content. So
Yeah.
we have, I mean, I have just had so many people in my life develop cancer, and I'm just like, we need to be like take my product out of it. I have 3 cruciferous vegetables, but if somebody really wants to avoid cancer, there are certain nutrients that they really want to get. Turmeric would be one of them. Another one would be cruciferous vegetables, but specifically, like my girlfriend has had cancer in the past. And so we grow broccoli sprouts and we put it in our smoothie. And it's
Okay.
very simple. And it's a super healthy thing to add. And it has to be uncooked. Because there's any I won't go through the whole thing, but it has to be
Yeah.
uncooked. You add back some of the myrinase, which is the enzyme that triggers the whole thing to create sulforaphane. So in any event, but
Okay.
there's so many things that people can do. And I'm passionate about the idea of for people that are interested, let's avoid getting these diseases to begin with, because it's not that hard if doing it consistently in advance. It doesn't even have to be that big of a deal. So that was why I designed it as a smoothie additive, so people can really add it in. Oh, and one thing on that, the United States diet was broken down into components, and 42% were fats and sugars, refined fats and sugars. 20% refined grains, 26% was meat and dairy, and then 12% were whole plant foods, right? But if you look at that, 42% fats and sugars and 20% grains, that's zero nutrition essentially. You have plenty of calories, but zero nutrition. So almost 2/3 of the calories were of really no nutrition. Meat and dairy has some pluses and minuses, but where that really is important is the whole foods, and that's 12%. So that is what's called the phytochemical index. And there have now been all of these studies out of the University of Tehran Medical Sciences University, which is one of the most prestigious universities in that part of the world, not of the world, but in that part of the world.
Yeah.
They've done a whole series of studies on the phytochemical index, and they were looking at what percentage of the diet and how much does that are whole foods and how much does that impact things. So their lowest 25% of their country is at 14%, right? So their lowest 25% is higher than our average. So that's unfortunate. But their highest 25% was averaging 42%. And they looked at these differences for all these different diseases over the last like 12, 15 years. And for breast cancer, having the highest, the 42% compared to 14%, lowered it by 92%. So in other words, granted, these are small studies, so these are not massive studies, but they give an indication. So far, everything has been positive. So 92% reduction for breast cancer. It was a 91% reduction for pre-diabetes. It was a 66% reduction for obesity. It was a 62% reduction for depression. It was a 48% reduction for hypertension, et cetera, et cetera. Everything was positive. So what I try and do is I make a smoothie in the morning, and it's about a 24-ounce smoothie. I know that's a lot. My body's built up to having that.
Uh-huh.
But then I'm like getting this amazing amount of nutrition. It's 25% of my calories for the day.
I
And,
bet.
and it's really healthy stuff. So I'm just trying to do it because I still want to live life. I don't always eat healthy, but I want to have that base there to really,
Uh-huh.
really have a strong base. So I kind of rambled on there a little bit, but
No, no, I loved it. I loved it. That was great. No, I agree. It's yeah, I think part of it too, at least when I was growing up, right, with vegetables and all of those kinds of things. Um, I mean, my mother used to cook the shit out of them, you know.
yeah.
And I think that's why I didn't like them either, because they were just so soft and, you know. So, but we know now that the longer you cook it, the less you're going to get from them.
Yeah, but the
There's a
good
certain
thing you
point.
guys had at
You,
that time is the nutrition in the fruits and vegetables was
yeah.
substantially higher. We are depleting the nutrition in
Oh
our
my
fruits
God. Yeah.
drastically. And
Yeah. They're
so
not
I
even
really say that,
recognizable.
and I bet your audience knows that as well. But it's
Yeah.
really a shame like that. There's a way, and what is it? Steiner. What was the secret of the soils? What is that? Rudolf Steiner, I think was his name. And he created this whole thing. This was back almost 100 years ago about how to
Uh-huh.
remineralize our soils. And he had this whole
Ah,
thing that he put together. And I was like, what an amazing thing. We could totally remineralize our soil, but there's just no political will and there's no financial will to do it.
more importantly, yeah.
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 So I mean, we could completely revolutionize our food chain, and the health of Americans would go drastically up.
Yeah. Yeah. And the which I'm sure there are a lot of people who wouldn't like this, but the amount of money that has to go into medical services or medical support, right, would go way down because people wouldn't need it.
No, no. I mean, the thing is so if I showed you a picture of what my psoriasis looked like and what it's gone now, right? So
Yeah.
if I showed you like that's not supposed to happen. And it's not supposed to happen with diabetes. We're just giving, okay, we'll just give insulin, we'll just,
Yeah.
and we might give metformin. There are really good treatment protocols using nutraceuticals that are very effective. I mean, look at if
Mm-hmm.
any of your listeners just look at berberine and the studies compared to metformin,
Yeah.
found no difference in efficacy, right? And berberine has all these other things as well. I mean, that's just one. You talk about amla or Indian gooseberries, you talk about
Mm-hmm.
turmeric, et cetera, et cetera. They're just these amazing studies that if somebody wants to not have diabetes and wants to treat it naturally, they can effectively
Yeah.
treat it, especially if they're willing to do intermittent fasting, which is just eating during certain periods of the time. For your listeners that don't know what that is,
Right.
like starting at 8 in the morning and ending at 5 p.m. Like I know that's a
Uh-huh.
tight window for some, but if you can do that, it
Right.
drastically impacts it. Amen. I could go on and on in that. So
Well, that's good. It means you're knowledgeable in something that you're trying to communicate to people. You know.
well, that
So.
was a big one because we have so much diabetes where it was almost unknown, 100 and something years ago. And in 1958, it was less than 1% of the adult population. And as
Mm-hmm.
of I think 3 or 4 years ago, it was 11.3%. So it's just this drastic, and it's tracking with the obesity rates in this
Well, I
country.
was just going to say, yeah. Yeah,
Obesity,
which totally makes sense. I mean, they're a lot of it is the same problem. It's what people are eating and how much and when and
well, it goes down. I give a presentation on obesity, but it's
mm,
directly connected with diabetes. But
hmm
uh, there are all these things that are happening that are throwing people off, and they have
mm,
it's not I think what we see in the media in terms of what's going on. I'll give you an example. So in 1890, they did a census on the obesity rates in the United States. It was roughly 1890s. And it was 1.07% of the United States adults. But most of those were not truly obese people, though most of them were just really large people that were really powerfully built, and they might have a little bit of, but fast forward to now, it's 41.9%, right? So that's obesity, not overweight.
Yes.
Because it's a different category.
Yeah.
So we have this incredible movement in that direction. But if you look back in history, all the kings, queens, and royalty, they were having these 7-course meals at every meal, and they weren't overweight. It was very rare to see them overweight. You had like King Henry VIII, Louis le Gros or Louis the Fat. Both of them were, I'll say, overweight, but it was so rare. I mean, if you look, most of them weren't, because we're built to be in homeostasis. So the only way to be off is if we're thrown off by something. So I'll give you an example of something that where that's happened. And so there was a study done where they had Gauss meters where they were measuring the amount of Gausses, or electromagnetic frequency, that hit a woman during her pregnancy, right? Have you heard of this study? So, and they broke them into 3 groups: 1.5 Gausses or less, 1.5 to 2.5, and 2.5 or greater. And essentially, the one in the higher number compared to the lower, when they followed those children out 12 years, the children in the higher group had 6-fold the level of obesity compared to the ones in the lower group. And that's measuring something to something less. What would it be if it was something to nothing? Like we're talking about, we're playing in areas that we don't know, while at the same time 5G is going up all over Santa Barbara and probably in your area too.
Oh, already up. Yeah, totally.
And it's impacting other things, but that's just one thing. Then you have BPA, which impacts epinephrine, which is the diabetes and obesity hormone. And that one gets lowered in the presence of BPA. And so we have this epidemic of obesity and diabetes, and we have a thing that everybody that was tested in the study, they tested thousands of people, and there wasn't one person that they didn't detect BPA, and yet it lowers your hormone that causes diabetes and obesity. So we've got a bunch.
So tell us what BPA is.
Well, BPA is in the lining of cans and plastic bottles. And like that. That's why you see all these BPA free, because people now know that it's got some real bad side effects, and so they're trying to avoid it. But it's in cans because it's less expensive, and if it doesn't list it, you don't know if it has it or not. And even if it says BPA free, a lot of them have now alternative substances that are not great either.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's usually what happens.
Yeah,
they just find something else to do the same thing that's sometimes worse even than the other.
Yeah, we need an FDA that's going to really look out for us, and they're just this revolving door with industry. So yeah, so it makes it difficult as people on a path of trying to be as healthy as possible, which I can tell you're doing as well. It becomes hard waters to navigate. You know, how do you avoid EMFs? I mean, it's not even on most people's minds. How do you avoid BPA? How do you avoid pesticides? How do you avoid all? I mean, we're being barraged in all different ways.
That's true. That's very true. Yep.
Yeah. I mean,
it's
look back on lead and in our fuel supply. I mean, if you look back on that, the average, what was it? It was 17 nanograms per milliliter was the average blood level of lead. Now it's under 1. That's how big of a difference that made. So when people are worried about lead in all sorts of things, right? And they should be, because lead is not a good thing, right? But our levels were on average over 17 times higher in the 70s than it are now. And when looking at IQ levels, that would drop our whole nation's IQ by 5 points. Like it's and increased all these diseases. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I think a lot of it was huge when they started having the lead-free gasoline.
well, you see it immediately start dropping off drastically once they did that.
Yep.
And in Europe they banned it once they knew it was
Mhm.
toxin, and it took a long time here to figure that out.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I would put it exactly that way. I think it just took a long time because it had to do with dollars.
I agree with you. That is the reason why it took such a long time. Same with
Yeah.
DT. In
Yes.
my presentations, I show these children eating lunch, getting sprayed. Have you seen that where they're getting
Uh-uh.
sprayed on purpose to demonstrate that it's safe? Those children who are still alive today, they didn't need to get sprayed with DDT. They were just demonstrating that it was safe on these children that were eating lunch. So they were eating it in, breathing it in.
Oh
And
my God.
you can barely see the children because they're in this cloud. And
Oh,
those children, if they're still alive today, have that DDT in them. And it's directly connected with breast cancer. It's all sorts of other issues. So it's really, we need to have a government or an FDA that really protects us and have some outsiders other than, that are straight from the pharmaceutical or the food processing industry.
mm-hmm. This is true. This is true, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
No. So we got to take care of ourselves at this point.
Yeah, well, that's what we've all been doing for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I know. So it's yeah. Hmm. Okay, so you have your website. Why don't you tell everybody what it is?
It's sosnutrients.com. That's the best place to find out information
Yeah.
on it. But again, SOS, which stands for Science of Supplements, and then
Okay.
sosnutrients.com, just the word nutrients. So
Yeah. Okay. And I'll put it in the show notes.
okay.
So although I don't know about anybody else's podcast, I find that most people don't even read the show notes. They just listen or they watch and that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, sounds good. Well,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really appreciate you having me on today.
Hey, this has been great. I'm always interested and open to finding new and different places to get nutrients and instead of, I mean, I take a lot of supplements and I'm sure that they're probably not the best, but they're the best I could find.
What I do
So
often
finding
when
you
I do
is
presentations is I ask people to
uh-huh.
bring their supplements, and I just look at them and I go through them. And, a lot of times they're very good supplements. And if they are, I'll tell them. But if they are, almost surely they're really targeted. They're like turmeric with black pepper, or they're amla, or they're black cumin seed or something like that. But once they get into like the B vitamins or some a bunch of the minerals or vitamin C, they're almost always synthetic, unfortunately. So again, that's
Yeah.
why I chose to make this.
Yeah. 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 There are some that used to be out there. I haven't seen much of them actually lately that are a lot of them made from whole food, but they don't seem to be as common around as they used to be.
Wow, yeah, I don't know which ones you're referring to, but yeah, no,
Yeah.
I've been looking at this for many years now, and it's an
Yeah.
interesting thing to go down and see what people are coming out with, and I know the backstory since I've been doing
Yeah, I
all
bet.
the put this together, so I know why they're choosing, because I know what things cost now. So
Funny how that works, huh?
funny how that works. Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately for all of us. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on. It's been very enlightening, and I hope that everyone who listens to this can take at least a little bit of it and apply it in their own lives, if not able to get some of your products. And I will close with my usual, which is that neither of us are doctors. This is not to be seen as medical advice. And I will be talking to everybody next week.